The wedding march was swelling to a crescendo as I slid the diamond ring onto Victoria's finger. In the next second, she tore off her veil right in front of the congregation and bolted toward her one that got away, who had just returned from overseas. Amidst the stunned murmurs of the guests, I dialed my assistant. Upload the security footage of the bride running off. Post it to the official Sterling Corp social channels. When Vance Enterprises' stock price crashed, her parents knelt in my office, begging. I looked out at the bustling city traffic, sliding the acquisition agreement toward her father's trembling hand. Sign it, or watch your company go bankrupt tomorrow. The church hymns still echoed in my memory, but my judgment was only just beginning. The sacred melody was still reverberating under the cathedral dome. I stood at the end of the red carpet, watching my bride, Victoria Tory Vance, walk toward me on her father's arm. She was beautiful, her face beneath the white veil carrying just the right amount of shy anticipation. The officiant spoke solemnly. Victoria Vance, do you take Julian Sterling to be your wedded husband? Buzz, buzz, buzz. A jarring vibration interrupted him. The sound came from deep within Victoria's bouquet. She visibly panicked. In such a setting, a phone that should have been off became the most discordant note possible. The guest began to whisper. She instinctively moved to silence it, but when she saw the name flashing on the screen, she froze. The color drained from her face, replaced instantly by a look I had never seen before, a mix of shock, ecstasy, and reckless desperation. It was Caleb Rivers, her high school sweetheart, the man who was supposed to be ancient history. She didn't even glance at me. As if pulled by an invisible wire, she spun around, turning her back on the altar, on me, and answered the phone. Caleb, is it really you? You're back. At JFK. Her voice was hushed, but the irrepressible trembling and joy pierced through the solemn music like a needle, clearly audible to me in the front rows. I'm coming. Wait for me. No explanation, no hesitation. She hung up, shoved the expensive bouquet into her stunned mother's arms, and then, under the incredulous gaze of myself and the entire assembly, she gathered up the heavy hem of her wedding dress. Like a bird breaking free from a cage, she stumbled and sprinted out the side door of the cathedral. She ran. At my wedding, for a phone call from another man, she left me in a room full of elites behind. Time seemed to solidify. I could feel countless eyes focused on my back. Pity, sympathy, shock, and the mocking amusement of those watching a train wreck. My parents were livid. Victoria's parents were ghost white, trying to explain but unable to make a sound. The entire cathedral plummeted from peak romance to absolute absurdity and silence. Watching the scene unfold, my gaze turned icy. I turned to face the dumbfounded officiant and the guests. Keeping my voice as steady as possible, I spoke into the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, it seems today's ceremony must be paused. I apologize for the spectacle. Please, help yourselves to the reception if you wish. Without waiting for a reaction, I walked down from the altar through the silence and pitying stares and exited the church. In the car, I immediately called my executive assistant, Marcus. Issue a public statement in my name immediately. Drafted as follows. Today's wedding between Julian Sterling and Ms. Victoria Vance was interrupted due to a sudden personal emergency on Ms. Vance's part. Mr. Sterling respects all of Ms. Vance's choices and thanks friends and family for attending. This is a private matter, and we ask the public not to speculate to avoid secondary harm to both families. This statement seemed magnanimous and dignified, taking the high road, but it was a trap. Phrases like sudden personal emergency and respects all choices, combined with the fact that Victoria ran away, were enough for the media and the public to script a drama about a runaway bride chasing true love. It positioned me as the victim, garnering maximum sympathy, while placing the Vance family and Victoria directly on the moral roasting spit. Understood, Mr. Sterling. Do it. The effect was immediate. By that evening, hashtags like hashtag Sterling Air Jilted and hashtag Victoria Vance Runaway were trending nationally. Public opinion was overwhelmingly on my side, condemning Victoria for her lack of decency and the Vance family for their poor upbringing. Consequently, the corporate image and credit of Vance Enterprises took a massive hit. But this was merely the appetizer. I instructed all Sterling Corp subsidiaries to immediately reassess cooperative projects with Vance Enterprises, citing major reputational risk, pausing payments, and terminating negotiations. Simultaneously, in the secondary market, mysterious funds began quietly shorting Vance stock. A two-pronged attack. Vance Enterprises was already on shaky ground, relying entirely on a marriage with the Sterling family as a lifeline. Now, with the alliance dead and credibility shattered, coupled with my precision sniper attacks and panic selling in the market, their stock price collapsed like an avalanche. Partners terminated contracts. Bank loan officers blew up her father's phone. Within 3 days, the once glamorous Vance Enterprises was on the brink of bankruptcy. On the night of the 4th day, Victoria's parents, Chairman Richard Vance and his wife, Eleanor, appeared at the gates of the Sterling estate. Gone was their usual reserved arrogance. They looked haggard, eyes sunken like beaten dogs. I sat in the study, refusing to let them into the living room. Julian, no, Mr. Sterling. Richard's voice was hoarse, laced with pleading. We failed to raise our daughter right. Tora, she lost her mind. We apologize on her behalf. Please, have mercy. Give the Vance family a way out. Eleanor wiped tears from her face, babbling, yes, Julian, for the sake of the old friendship between our families. Friendship? I looked up at them. Mr. and Mrs. Vance, when Victoria trampled the Sterling family's face into the dirt in front of the entire city's elite, did you think about friendship? They were speechless, their faces turning gray. I picked up a document prepared on my desk and slid it toward them. This is the Supplementary Strategic Cooperation Agreement drafted by Sterling Corp. Sign it, and I will temporarily halt the special attention on your company. Furthermore, I can inject liquidity to help you survive this immediate crisis. Richard's trembling hand picked up the agreement. He flipped through a few pages, and his expression darkened. The conditions listed were draconian. It essentially required Vance Enterprises to unconditionally surrender control of its most profitable core business sectors and mortgage multiple prime real estate assets. This wasn't cooperation. This was robbery, a naked demand for reparations. Mr. Sterling, these terms. His lips quivered, barely able to hold the papers that felt heavier than lead. Sign or don't. I leaned back, my tone indifferent. The life or death of your company depends on your thought process right now. I'm not negotiating with you. Dead silence filled the study, broken only by Eleanor's suppressed sobbing. After a long while, Richard looked as if his spine had been removed. He slumped into the chair, picked up the pen with a shaking hand, and finally, at the end of that humiliating agreement, signed his name. Watching the ink dry, I felt no joy. Marcus walked in and silently collected the documents. I looked out the window at the heavy night sky, viewing it like a battlefield where I had just begun my conquest. This, I said softly, is just the interest. The real reckoning was yet to come. Victoria, Caleb. Neither of you will escape. The agreement Richard Vance signed acted like a potent tourniquet. It temporarily stalled their bankruptcy, but completely drained the backbone they would need to ever recover. I had no interest in the internal chaos of their household. Sterling Corp had too much real business to handle. But the wind does not stop just because the tree wishes for calm. A few days later, a beautifully crafted invitation, worded so humbly it bordered on sycophancy, landed on my desk. The Vance family was hosting a dinner party. Nominally, it was to formally apologize to the Sterling family and myself for the major error at the wedding and to mend the rift. Mend the rift? I fingered the heavy cardstock and sneered. They just wanted to use this pretext to show the world that the Vance and Sterling families hadn't completely broken ties, hoping to salvage a shred of their teetering reputation and credit. They wanted to see if they could scrape a few more crumbs from between my fingers or attract some other sucker to bail them out. Marcus stood by, waiting for instructions. Tell them I'll be there on time. I wanted to see exactly how they planned to perform this play. On the day of the banquet, I went alone. There was no need for my parents to get any of this filth on them. The Vances had rented a ballroom at a 5-star hotel. The setup was lavish, but the guests looked skeptical. Curiosity, observation, and schadenfreude were the dominant moods. Few were there to offer genuine support. Victoria's parents waited at the entrance early. Seeing me, they plastered on almost servile smiles, bowing low, calling me Mr. Sterling with every breath, carefully ushering me inside. Victoria was there too, wearing a plain white dress, eyes cast down, afraid to meet my gaze. Her face wore a mask of practiced guilt and unease. The banquet began in a strange, oppressive atmosphere. Richard took the stage, reading from a speech. Choking back tears, he wept openly, criticizing his own failure as a father and the harm caused to the Sterling family, begging for my forgiveness. Scattered, symbolic applause rippled through the room. I sat at the main table, listening expressionlessly, occasionally taking a sip of wine, offering no comment. The timing was about right. I excused myself, walked to the lounge area, and dialed Caleb Rivers' number. Caleb's voice came through, wary but laced with bravado. Julian Sterling? What do you want? Nothing much, I said, my tone light, dripping with undisguised contempt. I just suddenly wondered how a loser who relies on women for handouts is doing these days. What the hell did you say? His voice spiked instantly, full of the humiliation of having a sore spot poked. Did I say something wrong? You're garbage who only knows how to grovel at a woman's feet. Julian, go to hell. Heavy breathing and the sound of things smashing came through the phone. He had lost control. You think you're so great because you have money. Tori loves me. She doesn't love you at all. You just wait. I'm coming to get her right now. No one is going to stop us. Click. The call was slammed shut. I knew the bait had been taken. The beast was out of the cage. I straightened my suit and returned to the banquet hall as if nothing had happened. Richard's penitent speech had just ended. He was holding a wine glass, walking toward me with an ingratiating smile, seemingly wanting to make a final effort. Just then, Tori, a desperate, final roar exploded from the banquet hall entrance. Everyone turned in horror to see Caleb Rivers rushing in like a madman. His hair was a mess, his eyes bloodshot, and in his hand he gripped a steak knife clearly swiped from a kitchen. He waved the blade, charging recklessly toward the head table. His target was clear, Victoria. Security tried to stop him, but his manic momentum and the flashing blade forced them back. Caleb, Victoria screamed, her face pale. Tori, come with me. Now. Caleb stopped a few steps away. He suddenly turned the blade inward, pressing it against his own carotid artery. His eyes bulged, fixed on Victoria. That bastard, Julian, humiliated me. I can't take it anymore. What's the point of living without you? If you don't leave with me today, I'll die right here. Blood everywhere. The hall went deathly silent. You could hear a pin drop. Everyone was stunned by this sudden, cinematic scene. No, Caleb, don't do anything stupid. Victoria broke down instantly, looking at the cold blade against his neck and the resolve in his eyes. All her previous pretenses of guilt vanished. Under the horrified gazes of everyone, including her parents, she shoved aside her mother who tried to grab her. Like a moth to a flame, she stumbled and sprinted toward Caleb without hesitation, diving into his arms and hugging him with all her strength. I'll go with you. Caleb, I'll go with you. She lifted her head, tears streaming down her face, her voice echoing clearly in the silent hall, declaring a scorched earth truth. It's always been you. Only you. I never loved Julian Sterling. Not for a single second. Boom. This sentence was a bomb that blew away the Vance family's last fig leaf and buried their final hope of salvation. You ungrateful wretch. Richard pointed at the embracing couple, his whole body shaking violently. His face turned from red to purple, his breathing became ragged. He clutched his chest, unable to finish his sentence. His eyes rolled back, and he collapsed stiffly backward. Richard, Eleanor let out a piercing scream and threw herself at him. The scene instantly dissolved into chaos. People shouted, called 911, and crowded around the fallen patriarch. In the confusion, Eleanor suddenly looked up, her eyes venomous as they fixed on Victoria, still hugging Caleb. Like a mother beast driven mad, she rushed over and, with all her strength, slapped Victoria across the face. Smack! The crisp sound of the slap briefly cut through the noise. I'll beat you to death, you shameless thing. You've utterly disgraced the family. How did I give birth to such a disaster? Eleanor cried and cursed hysterically. Victoria clutched her face, looking at her mother in disbelief, while Caleb shielded her, facing off against Eleanor. The situation was completely out of control, a display of utter grotesquerie. I stood at the edge of the chaos, watching it all coldly. Only when the ambulance sirens wailed closer and paramedics rushed in with a stretcher to haul the unconscious Richard away, Eleanor crying as she followed them, did the room clear out. All that remained were a few stunned guests and the couple who had finally found their happy ending amidst the wreckage. I walked forward slowly. My gaze swept over Victoria, pale and shivering in Caleb's arms, and Caleb, who looked alert and hostile. My face appropriately displayed exhaustion and deep hurt. Mrs. Vance, I said toward the direction Eleanor had left. My voice wasn't loud, but it was clear enough for the remaining people to hear, carrying the gravity of someone repeatedly trampled upon. It seems the Vance family's sincerity ends here. I paused, and under the suddenly tense gazes of Victoria and Caleb, I continued. This farce has caused immeasurable damage to my reputation and to Sterling Corp. The foundation for that previous agreement no longer exists. I looked at their instantly despairing eyes, delivering the final verdict. I will have my assistant bring a new compensation plan to the hospital for Mrs. Vance. With that, I ignored them, turned around, and amidst the wreckage and complex stares, walked away calmly. Behind me, I heard Victoria's broken sobbing and Caleb's impotent roaring. New leverage secured. It was time to squeeze the last drop of value out of the Vance family. Negotiating the new terms with the Vance family went even smoother than I expected. Facing a husband lying in the ICU with an uncertain prognosis and a daughter who had completely burned bridges to run off with a wild man, Eleanor Vance's spirit had utterly collapsed. The new compensation plan Marcus brought was designed to suck the last marrow from the Vance bones, yet she merely looked at it numbly and signed her name at the bottom. To her, perhaps saving Richard's life and keeping their crumbling home from immediate foreclosure was worth any price. I got what I wanted. Controlling stakes in the last few projects the Vance family had that could still lay golden eggs and mortgage rights to their remaining core real estate. The process was cold, like a transaction, because that's exactly what it was. I thought that after the utter humiliation at the apology banquet, Victoria would have accepted reality. Or, at least, she should have had enough self-awareness to keep her head down. But I overestimated her intelligence. Or perhaps I underestimated the courage given to her by her great love with Caleb. The afternoon after the agreement was signed, she actually came to my office again. This time, she lacked the hysteria of before. She wore no makeup, dressed plainly, and her eyes were red and swollen. She adopted a submissive posture I had never seen from her. Julian, she stood before my desk, hands clasped nervously, her voice mosquito-thin. I'm here to formally apologize for my behavior. I didn't speak. I just leaned back in my chair, watching her perform. I know I made many mistakes. I hurt you, and I dragged my family down. Tears slid down her face right on cue. I don't expect you to forgive me immediately. I only hope you can give me another chance, and give the Vance family a chance. She lifted teary eyes filled with sincere regret and careful hope. The engagement, we can continue. I promise to be obedient and be a good wife. It's just, can you give us some time? Wait until my dad is stable, until my family catches its breath. Then we can hold the wedding. Okay. I almost applauded her acting skills. Even at this stage, she was calculating, trying to use a phantom engagement to hold me hostage, to buy time for her and her family. She probably still harbored the naive fantasy of turning things around later as Mrs. Sterling. Watching this hypocritical display, I lost my last shred of patience. It was time to end this farce completely. Victoria, I interrupted her emotional performance. My voice was calm, but carried a piercing chill. Have you always believed that it was a twist of fate, a misunderstanding that separated you and Caleb years ago? That you were forced to accept a family arrangement and marry me? She froze, her eyes flickering, seemingly confused why I brought this up. Do you think Caleb went abroad back then to pursue a better future? To make himself worthy of you before temporarily leaving? I continued, every word an ice pick. Her expression shifted, showing a panic of having a secret touched upon, followed by instinctive denial. What? What do you mean? I stood up, walked to the window, and turned my back to her, watching the traffic crawling like ants below. It was time to unsheath the blade I had been sharpening for a long time. The meaning is simple. I turned around, my gaze sharp as a knife, stabbing into her anxious eyes. You think Caleb left you so abruptly because he got an acceptance letter and a scholarship from a top foreign university? Because he had ambition and ideals? I let out a short laugh, the mockery making her tremble. Don't be naive. I enunciated every word, declaring the truth. It was your good father. He despised Caleb's poverty, despised him for being unworthy of a Vance heiress. He approached him privately, gave him $100,000 in cash, plus a forged acceptance letter that wasn't worth the paper it was printed on, and told him to leave. He took the money. He was paid off like a beggar. The so-called great future was just a lie meticulously woven by your father to make him disappear. Boom! The color drained from Victoria's face instantly. She took a sharp step back, hitting the chair behind her with a harsh sound. Her eyes were wide, pupils contracting in extreme shock and disbelief. No. Impossible. Her lips trembled, her voice shattering. You're lying. My dad, Caleb wouldn't. Wouldn't what? I stepped closer, my tone cruel. Wouldn't give you up for $100,000? Or your father wouldn't do such a thing. Victoria, you've lived in your self-righteous romantic fairy tale for too long. Long enough that you can't see the true faces of the people around you, nor how ridiculous you look. The truth was like a branding iron seared on her heart. All her perceptions, her nostalgia for the past, her understanding of Caleb's forced departure. In this moment, everything was smashed to dust. Ah! She let out a scream that didn't sound human, covering her ears as if to block out the cruel facts. She stopped looking at me, like a madwoman. She turned and stumbled out of my office. I knew where she was going, and sure enough, Victoria was a lit fuse. She rushed directly to the VIP ward where her father was staying. According to the surveillance footage Marcus pulled later and the nurse's accounts, when she burst in, Richard had just stabilized. He was wearing an oxygen mask, lying weakly in bed. She completely lost her mind. She lunged at the bed, ripped the oxygen mask off his face, grabbed the collar of his hospital gown, and screamed her questions hysterically. Was it you? Did you use money to drive Caleb away? Say it. Tell me if it's true. Richard was stunned by this sudden madness. His face, which had just recovered slightly, turned purple instantly. He tried to explain, but his weak body and his daughter's frantic interrogation made speech impossible. He could only make ragged, gasping sounds. You lied to me. You all lied to me. Victoria had snapped. She shook Richard's body violently. You ruined my love. You ruined me. I hate you. I hate you. The violent emotional shock and the physical shaking were the final straw. His eyes bulged, his body convulsed violently, his head lolled to the side, and he slipped into a coma again, saliva drooling uncontrollably from the corner of his mouth. The monitor erupted in alarms. Medical staff rushed in, pulling the manic Victoria away and starting emergency resuscitation on Richard. Because of this sudden shock, a blood vessel in Richard's brain ruptured again. Although they saved his life, the damage was severe. Hemiplegia, slurred speech. He lost the ability to think clearly or run a company. The Vance family was officially headless. The time had come. I didn't hesitate. I immediately initiated the final plan. Marcus led a massive legal and commercial team, like sharks scenting blood, pouncing on Vance Enterprises, which was now in total chaos. Kick them while they're down. The agreements signed earlier became the ultimate tools of plunder, citing inability to fulfill contractual obligations and major operational risk. We took full control of the core businesses and collateral assets designated previously. In the stock market, we mercilessly executed the final round of shorting. When a wall is about to fall, everyone gives it a shove. Seeing this, other partners and creditors joined the feeding frenzy. The already dilapidated skyscraper of Vance Enterprises, having lost its last pillar, collapsed with visible speed. Assets were dismembered and swallowed. They were pushed completely over the edge of bankruptcy. A few days later, in a hospital room reeking of antiseptic, the once powerful Chairman Vance now lay with a twisted mouth, half his body paralyzed, his cloudy eyes full of despair. Victoria sat by the bed, soul lost. She had no tears left, only a numb emptiness. Richard used his one functioning hand to grip Victoria's wrist tightly. From his throat came blurred syllables that exhausted all his strength, tears streaming down his face. We're all calculated by Julian. Victoria's body trembled violently. In her empty eyes, a trace of belated, bone-chilling fear finally flashed. The collapse of the Vance Group happened faster than anticipated. Without leadership, crippled by internal factional fighting and encircled by external enemies, the remaining assets were like a broken sampan in a storm, torn apart in an instant. Sterling Corp was, without a doubt, the predator that ate the most and bit the hardest at this feast. I sat in my office, listening to Marcus methodically report the progress of project acquisitions and asset liquidations. Everything was going according to plan, precise as clockwork. Just then, Marcus's internal line rang. He answered, listened for a moment, covered the receiver, and turned to me. His face showed no surprise. Mr. Sterling, Victoria Vance, and Caleb Rivers are in the lobby. They are very emotional and insisting on seeing you. I raised an eyebrow. Finally, a little later than I thought. Let them up. I wanted to see what kind of scene they could possibly act out now that they had reached the end of the line. The office door was pushed open, and the two of them practically stumbled in. Victoria had lost her former radiance. She wore an ill-fitting, coarse dress. Her hair was dry, eyes sunken, skin an unhealthy, sallow color. Caleb followed her, equally wretched, unshaven, eyes bloodshot, filled with the anxiety of a dead end. Thud! To my surprise, Victoria dropped directly to her knees on the cold marble floor. Caleb froze, looked at Victoria, then at me. A flash of humiliation crossed his face, but he gritted his teeth and knelt beside her. Julian, Mr. Sterling. Victoria's voice was hoarse and tearful. Please, have mercy. Let our family go. I know I was wrong. It's all my fault. My dad is already in that state. The company is gone. What more do you want before you stop? Caleb looked up, stiffening his neck, trying to maintain a shred of pitiful dignity. Julian, you made your point. You've taken everything from the Van Cess. Isn't that enough? Do you have to drive them to extinction? I looked down at this pair of star-crossed lovers, kneeling at my feet. I felt no ripple of emotion, only the indifference of a hunter watching prey finally fall into the trap. Let you go. I repeated the phrase softly, savoring the joke. I walked out from behind the desk, pacing in front of them, looking down from above. Victoria, did you always think that running away at the wedding was just a coincidence? A romantic, brave accident where you chased true love? My voice was calm, but like a cold scalpel, it began to peel away the truth. Victoria looked up, teary eyes filled with confusion. Did you know? A few nights before the wedding, I heard you calling Caleb's name in your sleep. Not only that, I found a photo of him you kept hidden in your purse. I leaned in slightly, locking eyes with her shrinking pupils. Her face went sheet white, lips trembling uncontrollably. I, Julian Sterling, am not generous enough to tolerate a wife who holds another man in her heart day and night. My voice remained steady, but every word carried crushing weight. So I found him. My gaze shifted to Caleb. Panic flashed across his face. I found this man, your white moonlight, whom your father paid off with $100,000 and a fake diploma. My contempt was undisguised. I investigated the truth of his departure and found out exactly what kind of life he was living abroad these past few years, buried in gambling, debt, destitute, living like a rat in a sewer. So I pulled some strings. I settled some of his immediate trouble and found a way to bring him back to the States. I watched the despair and horror grow in Victoria's eyes as I delivered the final, cruelest truth. I sent him back to you. I knew that as soon as he appeared, a fool like you, blinded by so-called love, would throw yourself at him regardless of the consequences. The escape at the wedding, the elopement declaration at the banquet. It was all within my calculations. I needed a reasonable excuse, one no one could fault, to swallow the Vance family whole. I spread my hands, my tone mocking, and you, perfectly, handed that excuse to me on a silver platter. Boom! The truth exploded in their minds like thunder. They had thought themselves fighters against fate, brave warriors for love. They never imagined that from start to finish, they were merely pawns on my board. Every struggle, every moment of uncontrollable passion was part of my design to push them and their family into the abyss. Julian, you're not human. You're a monster. Victoria broke first. She screamed shrilly, leaping from the floor like a banshee, claws out, lunging at me. The hatred in her eyes looked ready to devour me alive. Almost simultaneously, Caleb lost it. All his fear and humiliation turned into blind rage. He roared, "I'll kill you," and followed Victoria, swinging a fist at me. Unfortunately, they couldn't even touch the hem of my jacket. With a single glance from me, four burly, highly trained security guards surged in from the hallway. Like iron clamps, they pinned the two of them instantly. Victoria's screams were muffled into whimpers as her legs kicked futilely. Caleb's arm was twisted behind his back before he could throw a punch, his face pressed hard against the cold floor, distorted by the pressure. They struggled like fish thrown onto the shore, only revealing more of their pathetic desperation. Throw them out, I ordered indifferently, like taking out the trash. The guards showed no mercy. They hauled the pair up, ignoring their screams and curses, dragged them down the corridor and under the stunned gaze of the staff, threw them out of the main entrance of Sterling Corp. The world was quiet again. I walked to the window and looked down. Soon, I saw two small figures ejected from the revolving doors, collapsing onto the busy sidewalk, drawing pointing fingers from passersby. You can start the final phase. Vance Enterprises should be history now. I watched the couple downstairs supporting each other like stray dogs and picked up the internal phone. Caleb Rivers has no more utility. Withdraw the protection on him. That order was like pulling the last sandbag from a holding dam. Before, Caleb had only survived because of the vague protection Sterling Corp exerted overseas and the creditors' fear of my family's influence. Now that fragile shield vanished instantly. The predators lurking in the shadows smelled blood immediately. The debt Caleb owed overseas wasn't credit card bills. It was massive gambling debt owed to syndicates, involving violence and astronomical interest rates. The collectors were not saints. According to the fragmented reports I received later, After being thrown out of Sterling Corp, Caleb and Victoria didn't dare return to their shabby tin roof rental. They moved like frightened mice, constantly changing hiding spots in the city's grimiest corners, surviving on the meager cash from pawning Victoria's last piece of jewelry. But that money wasn't even enough to cover the interest. It didn't take the creditors long to find them. On a damp evening, several men with tattoos and grim faces cornered them in a cheap motel room. No warnings, no negotiations. Caleb was greeted with a brutal beating. Fists and boots rained down on him. The crack of bone and howls of pain echoed in the small room. Victoria screamed, trying to stop them, but was shoved violently against the wall, silenced by the impact. The men took everything of value, including an old watch Victoria wore. The leader, a man with a scar, ground his heel into Caleb's bruised face and gave a deadline. 3 days. Principal plus interest. Not a penny less. Or the next time, they wouldn't just be using fists. Fear, like a cold vine, strangled Caleb's heart. He knew these people didn't make idle threats. 3 days? He couldn't raise that money if he robbed a bank. Staying meant death. Before dawn the next day, while Victoria slept from exhaustion and shock, Caleb made his choice. He stole the last few bills Victoria had hidden under the pillow for food and, like a ghost, slipped out of the motel. He avoided any transport requiring ID, running on instinct through a maze of alleys and abandoned buildings. He felt eyes on his back. Every rustle of wind terrified him. He found a temporary refuge in a condemned building awaiting demolition. It was high, abandoned, a skeleton of concrete and rebar. He curled up in a windowless corner on the top floor, barely breathing. Perhaps it was the exhaustion or the paranoia induced by terror. In the darkness, he thought he heard footsteps and muffled voices from below. Are they upstairs? Definitely, he can't run far. Absolute terror seized him. He sprang up like a coiled spring, running blindly toward what he thought was the safety of the roof access. In the dark, he couldn't see his footing. At a turn in the stairwell, where the railing had long since rusted away, his foot met empty air. With a short, sharp gasp, followed by the sound of tumbling debris, he plummeted 6 stories. Thud! The heavy, wet sound of impact was jarring in the silent ruins. Minutes later, men in black suits found him. Caleb lay twisted on the cold concrete, a pool of dark red spreading beneath him. His eyes were wide open in terror, but the breath had left him. When the news came back, I was signing the final paperwork for an acquisition. Marcus reported Caleb's death calmly, as if discussing the weather. I didn't stop writing. I just gave a faint Caleb's end was written the moment he took the money to leave Victoria, the moment he agreed to be my pawn. Greed, cowardice, and a little twist of fate were enough to send him to hell. Victoria didn't find out until noon the next day, hearing the whispers of strangers on the street while she was out collecting empty bottles to trade for food. In that moment, her soul seemed to evaporate. Her family was gone, her father paralyzed, and now the love she had sacrificed everything for had ended in such a gruesome, pathetic way. She stood frozen, staring into the void, her world collapsing into dust. The last thing holding her up shattered. She stumbled back to the bridge underpass where they had been squatting. There, she found a rusty but sharp utility knife discarded by a vagrant. Gripping it, eyes fixed in a 1,000-yard stare, mumbling Caleb's name and incoherent curses, she snapped. Like a cornered animal, she charged at the men who had just arrived. Creditors sent to verify Caleb was actually dead. It was you. You killed Caleb. I'll kill you, she shrieked, swinging the rusty blade wildly. The men didn't take the emaciated, hysterical woman seriously. Easily dodging her weak attack, the leader flashed a look of annoyance. Damn crazy bitch. He sidestepped the blade and kicked hard at the side of her knee. Snap! The sound of a ligament tearing was distinct. Victoria let out a wretched scream and collapsed. Another man followed up, stomping ruthlessly on her other calf. A dull crunch. She lay like a heap of mud, legs twisted at unnatural angles. The pain caused her to black out instantly, the rusty knife clattering to the ground. The men spat, cursed their bad luck, confirmed Caleb was dead, and couldn't be bothered with the crippled woman. They turned and vanished into the alley. Victoria didn't die, but when she woke up under the cold bridge, her legs had lost all feeling. Agony came in waves. She tried to move, but could only writhe helplessly on the ground. No money, no home, no family. And now, she had lost the ability to stand or walk. The once proud heiress of Vance Enterprises now dragged her broken legs through the dirt, relying on crawling to search trash heaps for scraps of food, enduring the mixed gazes of pity and disgust for passersby. Her mind drifted in and out of reality. Sometimes she would giggle at the air, other times she would burst into tears, muttering names over and over, Caleb, Daddy, Julian, and a belated, I was wrong, that no one would ever hear. A few days later, on the top floor of the Sterling Corp Tower, Marcus stood behind me, speaking respectfully. Caleb Rivers' death is confirmed. The body has been handled by the authorities. Victoria Vance is permanently disabled and mentally unstable. She's currently on the streets, surviving by begging and scavenging. Her condition is critical. Life expectancy is minimal. The bankruptcy and liquidation of Vance Enterprises are complete. All valuable assets have been merged into Sterling Corp. Richard Vance remains hospitalized, cared for by a mentally broken Eleanor Vance. They are selling their last personal items to pay medical bills. They pose no threat. I stood before the massive floor-to-ceiling window, looking down at the prosperous cold city beneath my feet. The setting sun plated the steel forest in an illusory gold. All the noise, the betrayal, the obstacles, they had been thoroughly purged. Victoria, Caleb, the Vance family, they used their greed, stupidity, and treachery to pave their own road to destruction. I simply gave them a gentle push, and then calmly harvested the spoils. I nodded slightly. Marcus retreated quietly. I was left alone in the office. In the extreme silence, there was the sensation of absolute power and control. My gaze moved past the city skyline, toward a more distant, broader horizon. The game here was over. But for Sterling Corp. and for Julian Sterling, the conquest had only just begun. Story complete.